I locked myself away for 6 months, and what happened during that isolation completely shattered everything I thought I knew about personal transformation, masculine development, and the true source of unshakable confidence. What I am about to share with you is not a success story or motivational tale. It is a raw account of the most difficult and rewarding experience of my life, and understanding what I discovered during those months of voluntary exile could change your entire approach to growth, challenge, and becoming the man you are capable of being. But before I tell you what happened, you need to understand why I made such an extreme decision in the first place. 3 years ago, I was living what looked like a successful life from the outside: decent career, active social life, regular entertainment and distractions, all the things that society tells us should make us happy and fulfilled. But internally, I felt empty, directionless, and increasingly aware that I was living according to other people's expectations, rather than developing my own capabilities and pursuing my own vision of what my life could become. I had become addicted to comfort, dependent on external validation, and terrified of the kind of challenges that would reveal what I was actually made of underneath all the social performance and image management. The breaking point came when I realized that I had never spent more than a few hours alone without some form of entertainment or distraction, which meant I had no idea who I actually was beneath all the roles I played for other people, and the habits I used to avoid confronting my own thoughts and feelings. I was a stranger to myself, and that recognition was more terrifying than any external challenge I had ever faced. So I made a decision that everyone in my life thought was extreme and unnecessary. I would disappear completely for 6 months, and use that time to strip away everything comfortable and familiar to discover what remained when all the crutches and distractions were removed. The first phase of the isolation was elimination, and it was more difficult than I had anticipated. I canceled my social media accounts entirely, ended casual friendships that were based more on convenience than genuine connection, stopped consuming entertainment that served as mental junk food, eliminated alcohol and other substances that I used to manage social anxiety or boredom, and restructured my living situation to remove every possible distraction from the work of confronting myself honestly. I told my family and close friends that I would be unavailable for non-emergency contact for 6 months, and I asked them to respect that boundary, even if they did not understand it. Most people thought I was having some kind of breakdown or crisis, but a few recognized that I was actually trying to have a breakthrough instead. The first month was hell. Without distractions, I was forced to face the full intensity of my own thoughts, emotions, and the crushing reality of how much time I had wasted on meaningless activities that contributed nothing to my growth or the welfare of others. I experienced withdrawal symptoms from social media and entertainment that were similar to what addicts describe when getting clean: anxiety, restlessness, a desperate craving for stimulation and validation that I could not satisfy through my usual methods. I discovered that I had been using constant activity and social interaction to avoid dealing with unresolved emotions, unexamined beliefs, and uncomfortable truths about my own character and capabilities that I had been pushing down for years. But somewhere around week 6, something shifted. The constant mental noise that had been drowning out my authentic thoughts and feelings began to quiet, and I started experiencing moments of clarity and self-awareness that I had never accessed while living my distracted life. I began to understand the difference between who I actually was and who I had been performing to be for the approval of others. I started developing genuine interests and preferences, rather than just adopting whatever seemed socially acceptable or impressive. I discovered capabilities and strengths that had been buried under years of comfort-seeking and challenge avoidance. The second phase was reconstruction, where I began systematically building new habits, skills, and perspectives that were aligned with my authentic values rather than social expectations or peer pressure. I developed a daily routine that included intense physical training, skill development in areas that genuinely interested me, deep study of subjects that expanded my understanding of human nature and leadership, and contemplative practices that strengthened my ability to think clearly under pressure and maintain focus on long-term objectives despite short-term discomfort. I learned practical skills that made me more self-reliant and less dependent on others for basic needs and problem-solving. I studied the biographies and teachings of men throughout history who had faced extraordinary challenges and developed extraordinary character in response to those challenges. I practiced deliberate discomfort through cold exposure, fasting, and physical challenges that taught me that my limits were mostly mental constructs rather than actual physical or psychological boundaries. But the most important discovery was that isolation had revealed the difference between confidence that comes from external validation and confidence that comes from genuine self-knowledge and proven capability. For the first time in my adult life, I felt genuinely confident in my ability to handle whatever challenges might arise because I had tested myself against voluntary hardship and discovered that I was stronger and more capable than I had ever imagined. The third phase was integration, where I began carefully and selectively reintroducing social interaction and external activities while maintaining the boundaries and practices that had created such powerful internal changes. I discovered that people responded to me differently even though I had not consciously changed how I treated them. They seemed to sense that something fundamental had shifted in my relationship with myself and the world. I found that I was no longer seeking approval or validation from others, because I had developed genuine self-respect based on my own assessment of my character and capabilities rather than other people's opinions. I was less reactive to criticism and less dependent on praise because my sense of worth was grounded in my own experience rather than external feedback. The challenges that had previously overwhelmed me now seemed manageable because I had proven to myself that I could handle discomfort, uncertainty, and isolation without falling apart or giving up on my principles. But here is what I found most surprising about the transformation. The 6 months of isolation had not made me antisocial or withdrawn. It had made me more genuinely interested in other people and more capable of creating meaningful connections based on authenticity rather than performance. When you are comfortable with yourself and clear about your own values and objectives, you can engage with others from a position of strength rather than neediness, which creates much more satisfying relationships and interactions. The isolation had also revealed that most of the activities and relationships I had thought were essential to my happiness were actually distractions that prevented me from developing the kind of life that would provide genuine fulfillment rather than just temporary pleasure or social validation. Now, 3 years later, I can honestly say that those 6 months of isolation were the most valuable investment I have ever made in my own development and future. The clarity, confidence, and capability that emerged from that experience have continued to compound and create opportunities and relationships that would not have been possible while I was living my distracted, externally focused previous life. But I want to be clear that this level of isolation is not necessary or appropriate for everyone. It was an extreme response to an extreme situation where I had become completely disconnected from my authentic self and dependent on external sources for my sense of identity and worth. If you are considering some form of strategic isolation or withdrawal from the distractions and social pressures that might be preventing you from developing your full potential, start with smaller experiments before committing to anything as intense as what I described. Try a 30-day elimination of your most addictive distractions, or a weekend retreat from social interaction, or a week without entertainment consumption. Pay attention to what you discover about yourself when the noise is reduced and you have space to think, feel, and choose based on your own authentic preferences rather than social programming. The goal is not to become a hermit, but to develop enough genuine self-knowledge and self-respect that you can engage with the world from a position of strength rather than weakness. authenticity rather than performance, and contribution rather than extraction. If you are ready to stop running from yourself and start discovering what you are actually capable of when all the distractions and excuses are removed, follow this channel and turn on notifications. The journey inward is the most challenging and most rewarding adventure you will ever undertake. What is one distraction you could eliminate from your life to create more space for authentic self-discovery? How might strategic